found such beautiful purpose in what others would deem a not so beautiful place. It's about how you can start to see the joy in the unexpected and how you can find meaning in the unlikely of places or people. And for me, that came in the form of a little girl named Pip. A little girl that created such a huge ripple effect of change for hundreds of thousands of people around the world just by simply being herself. But before I get into all of that, I think I should explain first that not so beautiful place. There was a time in my life where I literally couldn't even see straight because everything I thought my life was going to be or should be was shattered. You see, I think that there's this big illusion with becoming a parent. There's this grand idea of what your child's going to be, what they'll accomplish. I mean, even what they're going to look like. But to me, the real beauty in motherhood is this outrageous opportunity you get to create something. I mean, not only do you get to create who you become as a mother and what that means to who you become as a person, but to be given the responsibility to actually help form who another person, in essence, is going to be. That's such a beautiful privilege. But I guess the question is, what happens when what you've been given to create is not at all what you expected? What happens when what you've been given is what others would deem as negative, broken, or not worthy at all? Right before I was about to leave the hospital after I gave birth to my second child, a nurse came in and said that a heart specialist was coming up to see my newborn daughter, that they had detected a heart murmur. And I mean, that alone for a new mama would send you in a tailspin. As the heart specialist was giving her an exam, every second that ticked by, I was thinking the worst. But when he looked at me and said, "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but I see signs that your daughter has Down syndrome." Never in my life has it felt like someone physically slapped me across the face without actually touching me at all. Never in my life have I been so rocked by the unexpected. And never in my life have I had instant devastation. In that moment, I actually learned what it meant to weep. I mean, I had sad moments in my life. I had cried before. But this was different. This was as if my body knew I was in such shock and such sorrow that it almost had to cry for me. With Down syndrome, there's a blood test, and it takes a few days to confirm the results. And in that time, I was in such denial. I mean, I was begging God, fate, karma, whomever, anyone, that doctor's suspicions were wrong. When the results came back and it was positive, that's when the anger set in. And this girl got a major case of the why me's and the this isn't fairs. After the anger, I had a lot of guilt. And for me, the guilt was twofold. The first part was I replayed the pregnancy over and over. I had this blame that I had somehow caused Down syndrome. I picked up my toddler son. I definitely ate hot dogs. I cleaned the dryer lint. Heck, I even had gin and tonics before I knew I was pregnant. So there was this blame game involved. And the other part of the guilt was, I had this beautiful baby girl looking up at me, just wanting to be loved. And I was so scared that she could sense all the anger and sadness. And the sadness at times was overwhelming. I had to not only grieve what I thought my daughter was going to be, I had to grieve what the sibling relationship between my two children was going to be. I had to grieve what it meant to my life, to my husband's life. Every time I looked at my husband in those first few days, weeks, I just kept thinking, he's not going to be able to walk his little girl down the aisle. But thankfully, after I grieved, which I think is a huge step and process, I started to grow. And I started to think outside of the doctors, outside of society, and most importantly, outside of my own expectations. Going through something like this, it almost forces you to create new perspectives and it thankfully gets you to look at life a little bit differently. And I owe a lot to differences. Differences are what made me the person I am today standing in front of you. It's what makes me the mama I strive to be, and the advocate I hope to one day rise to. Differences are what rocked my world when my little girl Pip was born with Down syndrome, congenital cataracts, congenital heart defects, amongst many other health issues. Differences are what taught me confidence when I had to proudly show her off with a feeding tube, these big outrageous baby glasses, and eye patches to help with her vision. Differences are what taught me strength when I had to brush off comments from other children, calling her broken or gross, or hold my head up high amongst the constant "what's wrong with her" questions from strangers. Differences are what taught me grace when another mom is asked if she's having more children, and she answers no, I don't want to have a, and stops when she realizes I'm in the room. Differences are what taught me patience when children half Pip's age are lapping her in milestones or speaking in full sentences, and I so desperately just want to hear her say mama. Differences are what taught me to be grateful despite feeling jealous. When my girlfriends are all planning their days around play dates, and I'm coordinating doctor's appointments, OT, blood work, and speech therapy, I've learned to be grateful that our healthcare is so proactive and free. Differences are what taught me acceptance when I have to explain to my son why his little sister needed braces to help her walk, or why we need to learn sign language to help her communicate. Differences are what taught me to believe in something greater than myself when I traced the scars of her numerous surgeries, and I learned the powerful lesson of letting go. And differences, above anything else, have taught me that love is absolutely greater than any diagnosis or disability. Differences are what fueled the direction of my life. A week after my daughter was born, my husband and I sat in front of a team of doctors, and they were confirming her Down syndrome diagnosis. And Pip was in my arms, and a doctor looked at me and said, if you choose to have a third baby, which I'm just going to put the talk on pause for a minute, big announcement, we're having a third baby. The doctor says, if you choose to have a third baby, we can prevent this from happening. And right there, the tone was set on how some would value the life of my daughter. Right there, my life, Pip's life, exploded in beautiful purpose. Right there, a passion for change and a fight was awakened. And right there, the Happy Soul Project was born. You see, in that moment, I was given a choice. Grieving my daughter's disabilities left me in this raw place of indecision. I could choose to dwell in that and the what-ifs of life, or I could choose to take what we've been given and make something so damn beautiful with it, it's bound to cause others to stand up and notice. You see, I didn't want the tone that doctor placed on my daughter's life following her. I didn't want other people to look at her life or our lives with pity or sorrow. I wanted, in a way, kind of people to almost look at us and feel jealous, like they were missing out, like we were the lucky ones. And in living our lives that way, it's become our reality. So I decided to share that. I decided to open our lives and let people walk hand in hand on this journey with us as we raise a child with special needs. The ups, the downs, the good, the bad, but most importantly, so that people could see, although our lives was a little bit different, it was brilliant all the same. So I started a blog called Happy Soul Project, which has since turned into so much more. But it started, and the core of it is just a real raw look into a mama's heart. This is so much easier to do in front of my toddler and little boy. All right. So for me at the beginning, I had a really hard time telling people that Pip had Down syndrome. I mean, it was supposed to be this joyous time full of congratulations and she's beautiful. And instead it was bogged down by I'm sorry and, you know, you've been chosen. And even she doesn't even look like she has Down syndrome. So for me it was really hard, and the first time I physically said it to a stranger, I was really nervous. I didn't know how I would react, I didn't know how that person would react. And it was in a hospital gift shop. And it was this little old lady and she was ringing in my purchases. And I said it, and she put the items down and she came around the counter. And she grabbed my shoulders and she looked me right in the eyes as her eyes welled up with tears. And she told me that I was so, so lucky. And she later went on to explain that her brother had Down syndrome and all that that meant to her and her family. And in a way, that little old lady will never know it, but she opened the floodgates of purpose in my life. I now feel like I'm her and I'm shaking the world's shoulders, letting everyone know how lucky we are. So that very first blog post was written from the most vulnerable place in my life. It was my way of telling the world that my daughter had Down syndrome. And I didn't know it would connect so well with other parents. I didn't know it would go on to create a beautiful worldwide community. I didn't know it would turn into these projects and these initiatives that are helping make the world a better place. I didn't know how far Happy Soul Project would reach or how high it would soar. All I knew is that I was swept up in helping to create a much-needed change. A change I truly feel that Canada is leading the way on. It's one of the things I'm most proud of in our country. I mean, we accept people for who they are. You can marry whomever you love. You can practice whatever religion gives you peace. You can tattoo your face and pierce your nose. And for the most part, Canada welcomes you with open arms. Except there's still such stigma when it comes to disability. There's still this line drawn between typical and normal versus special needs. And while any gay, straight, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, goth, skateboarding punk can pick up a magazine and still somewhat find themselves in the pages, my little girl can't as easily. And that has to change. I need that to change. I truly think the world is ready for that change. But what can one little girl and one, obviously over-the-top mama, possibly even do? Y'all ready? Gets happier now. Yeah. We can make history and be the first child with special needs on the cover of the National Parenting magazine. We can inspire advertising and companies to include children with disabilities. We can win a radio competition and get over 40,000 votes and have our message, what makes you different is what makes you beautiful, on one of the busiest intersections in the country. We can then go on to work with the Canadian Down Syndrome Society and have our Paint Outside the Lines campaign on thousands of billboards across the country. We can start a conversation and be on Huffington Post Live, Cityline, Global TV, Good Morning America, and Fox News. We can be on major newspapers, other parenting sites, and even be dubbed Canada's famous baby with Down syndrome. We can inspire others in or on a journey similar. I can't even tell you the amount of messages we get from parents that have a pre-Down syndrome diagnosis and are on their way to terminate. And they Google Down syndrome and they find Pip and they've changed their mind. Or the amount of families that are now looking into adoption because of Pip. I mean, that's life-changing. We can have all of these children, all proud of who they are, featured in our Different is Beautiful calendar, and have that calendar in thousands of homes, offices, and most importantly, schools worldwide. We can employ adults with special needs and have their products sell out of our store literally within minutes. We can work with like-minded organizations and be the first baby to be named Canadian Down Syndrome Hero of the Year. We can give talks and work with schools, universities, and groups to help share our Different is Beautiful campaign. We can challenge others to look at people first and disabilities last and start a clothing company preaching that exact message so that others are kind of wearing visible change. We can get thousands of people to do a monthly Awesome A Act with us, in which is just a random act of kindness, leaving people with nothing left to say except awesome, eh? It's the Canadian in us. We can use our voice and challenge a radio station when they use the word retarded publicly to describe the weather. We can write a letter that goes viral, get the station to apologize, and most importantly, whether you agree or not to use the R word, we can start a conversation. We can talk to doctors, medical students, and social services to help change the unnecessarily negative Down syndrome diagnosis. We can work with major organizations like the OHL and put on events celebrating the beauty in others and bring awareness to World Down Syndrome Day. We can write a letter that's included in every hospital package in the country to new parents that are facing a Down syndrome diagnosis so that they feel the positive when it doesn't feel like that at all. We can start an initiative called Kick It Capes, in which we give personalized superhero capes to kids fighting cancer, terminal illness, or just having a hard time accepting a difference. Last week we gave a little boy fighting leukemia, a little girl with a brain tumor, and a 9-year-old getting glasses for the first time. Capes, just to lift them up. We sent close to 2,000 capes worldwide and now have schools, organizations, and individuals all helping to create and make these capes. And once again proving that people can indeed change the world. And most importantly, we can live our lives gratefully, celebrating and being exactly who we are. And my hope in doing all of this is that we can demand change. Change to have inclusion as much as we possibly can. Change to start seeing people for who they are and not the disability they have. And change to start celebrating differences, seeing them as awesome, cool, beautiful, and accepted. So I leave you with that. Live your lives knowing that you can inspire others to look at life a wee bit differently, because sometimes that makes the biggest difference. Be change.